Hey, what's up guys? John here. Do you know New York City has 60% of all offices completely vacant? Think about that. All the high-rise, all the office buildings, 60% are all vacant. What does this mean? Well, I think it's a really big growing trend, and it's a trend that's also following in Los Angeles. 15 to 16% of all offices are vacant. Even in Miami, the same vacancy rate, 15 to 16% as LA has Miami, right? Portland, Oregon, between 18 and 20% vacancy. We're seeing this across the board. And a couple big questions I have for myself, and I'm sure you're probably wondering the same thing, is what happens to all these landlords? What happens to the tax revenue? What happens to the citizens of these cities and these locations? Well, in Manhattan, for example, the average rent is $4,000 per month, meaning you have to make about $160,000 a year to just to live in the city. So if you were to open a business, would you go to a location where you have to, pay a basic wage of $160,000 a year or $150,000 a year just to bring employees in there when they could, work elsewhere? They can cross the bridge, they can enter New Jersey, they can go to other markets and work. And these expensive coastal cities like LA, New York, and Miami, you have to ask yourself, what is the future going to be like here? Well, with 60% vacancies, Mayor Adams in New York City says, this is going to be a continual trend until 2026. So another 4 years, he says at least 2026, with a minimum vacancy of 20%. 20%. So 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, the vacancies on offices were probably between 2 and 5%. And so what that means is when people are buying these buildings, they're factoring in their costs of probably having a vacancy of between 2 and 5%. They're factoring in what they can and can't raise their rents to due to the market conditions. They factor in certain clauses, insurance, how much insurance can go up, most likely. They take into consideration all of these things. They make their projections, they make their bet, and they put their money on the table and hope it works out. But now what we're seeing here is we're going to see that this is not likely going to work out, and we're going to see the biggest office crash, I believe, we've ever seen. And the reason I believe this is, let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, you're in New York City, you bought a $50 million deal, you and a couple partners. You're like, you know what, this is going to be a great deal. 2 years ago, everyone panicked, they left the city. Nobody wanted to be here, and we were able to get this distressed deal. This seller had to get out from under it. Let's put our money together. I'll put up $5 million, you put up $5 million, you put up $5 million, and we all go in, we buy this $50 million deal, and we finance $35 million of it, right? So we put up $15 million, we finance $35 million, right? Well, so the plan was to, obviously capitalize on everyone returning back and, the market doing extremely well. But here's where things are going to take a turn for the worse. So the business plan is to capitalize on the fear, right? The refinance of the building at a higher valuation when rents in the building appreciate. So if the building appreciates greatly, then you can refinance and take money out of the deal. And a great scenario would be you take all your money out of the deal, and then the building's worth $65 or $70 million, and you're just riding cash flow. But that's not going to be what's going to happen, because the vacancy rate went from 2.5% to 5% to 60%, right? So what's going to happen? Interest rates are rising, and the vacancies are rising. And so as that happens, cash flow is getting crushed from every direction, both from the potential revenue coming in and from interest rates. So when you go to refinance that property, you're likely not going to be able to get the refi because the money on the books, the income is just simply not going to be there. It's not going to be supporting it. So the big question I have is, what happens to all these buildings? I believe it's going to be the strongest survive. So what's going to happen is they're going to be reducing rents to attract people because it's supply and demand. If you have 60% of offices vacant, then, what are you going to do? You have to fill these offices. And if people aren't willing to pay the prices that you're advertising, you're going to have to drop it until you get people that are willing to pay it. That's the only option, right? The only thing is, there's not going to be a lot of people that have that option. So I believe we're going to see foreclosures across the board over the next couple of years in these expensive cities and office buildings. I think office is probably the most risky real estate asset class of them all. And I think that we are going to see people simply, if they're going to open a business, they're going to try to start a business where they can get an office cheap and their employees can work at a wage in which the business owner is actually able to pay it. Living in one of these expensive cities, having to pay, ridiculous rents and also offering your employees $100,000, $150,000 a year. And, it's just not attainable, right? And so what they're doing here and what's happening in New York City is they say that it took more than 2 years for companies to begin summoning their employees out of the pajamas and back into the office. And now it looks like landlords have something to celebrate. Since March of 2020 shut down, New York City's recovery reached a milestone, the first time as office occupancy topped 40% in the past week. Specifically, office attendance jumped nearly 5% from the previous week. The numbers come as the cases have been falling. The latest data from the City Health Department shows that 8.06% rate in the town is a decreasing trend, right? This is good news for our city's recovery, as the presence of office workers in central business district is critical for retail, restaurants, and other storefront businesses hit hard by the pandemic. James Whalen, president of Real Estate Board of New York, the post in the statement, as the public health situation continues to improve, policymakers must continue to focus on smart solutions that will bring new public and private sector investment into our urban centers to make them more resilient, equitable, and vibrant. In comparison, around this time last year, office occupancy was low as 10.6%, as many locals, specifically those who left the 5 boroughs to work remotely, remained out of the city. But since then, certain companies have implemented mandatory return to office policies. One of them is Citicorp, which upped its required office days from 2 weeks to 3 beginning in June. Still, while a big jump last year, 40%, is not 100%, and is still costing the city more than $600 million in annual property tax revenue. What does this mean? When they're losing $600 million on property tax or on the tax revenue, this means less police. This means less safety. This means people are not going to have those same social programs. You know, New York City is known for that, having assistance and all these different subsidies and all these different programs to help people. If you're losing $600 million as a city, what's ultimately going to happen? Those benefits are going to go away, right? And crime is going to go through the roof. It says commuting remains one of the biggest issues surrounding a full-time comeback, with rising crime rates on subways and trains. In the past year alone, subway assaults jumped 50% despite heightened security, right? This is what we're going to be seeing here, for sure, definitely, is mass foreclosures across the office real estate market, especially in these expensive markets, New York, LA. And these markets are high tax. These markets are very challenging for business operators to run in, because what happens? They have all these different regulations and restrictions and all these different problems. It's hard. That's why people are moving to places like Florida and Texas, because you have no income tax and the atmosphere is a little bit more friendly for business owners and operators, right? Why would you want to make things more challenging for yourself in an inflationary environment where things are already pretty tough as it is, right? People are leaving. But I wonder what's going to happen with these buildings. Could we see a situation in which maybe the cities start to purchase these properties and turn them into housing? You know, I've always thought about this. I've never thought it was really going to happen. Like, I don't think this is going to happen, mainly because they don't have bathrooms, they don't have living quarters. It will completely change the city as a whole. Imagine you had let's say a large building that had 200 offices in them, and you threw 4 or 5 people in each office, and there's no bathrooms, there's no showers, there's none of that. The only option would be to bring in temporary showers, temporary bathrooms, porta potties inside, or to almost rebuild them from the inside out. Nonetheless, it would completely change the zone. They would have to change out zoning laws. This would change property values in the city. I think it would bring values to a place where people would look and say, you know what? I need to get out of here, because right now I moved, let's say by Central Park, I moved here, and I was accepting of everything that was, I paid a big ticket price to be here, and now I have all these buildings around me that are going to put, 600 people here, or 3,000 people here, or 2,000 people here, and before you know it, I have 4,000 people living within a couple block radius, and a lot of them are in financial poverty and financial strains. People are going to say, you know what, I'm not going to spend $2 million to live here. I'm going to go out somewhere else. I'm going to go relocate. I'm going to move. But the big question is, what's going to happen with these buildings, right? They keep talking about affordable housing. They keep talking about all these solutions. Do you think that they would do something like this in New York, in Los Angeles, in other markets? They really, really talk about this. They really push about the big problem is affordable housing and needing to provide a solution. We are going to be stepping into a big problem in this economy. And the big question is, do you think that they will do this? Do you think that we're going to see a large wave of foreclosures and repossessions inside of the real estate space and office in these markets, specifically Los Angeles, New York, and Miami? Miami, I think, will hold a stronger ground than, say, like Los Angeles and New York a San Francisco, a Portland. These markets are challenging for operators, business operators, and I think it's more likely that they fall. But I still think Miami vacancy rate, given the fact that Miami's demand has increased so much over the last couple of years, is still relatively surprising. But still, take into consideration, rents have jumped almost 58% in Miami as a whole. So if you were to go open a business and you wanted to open one in South Florida, would you logically open a location in Miami knowing that the employees you're going to attract are going to be spending 58% more in rent, and that cost is actually going to be assumed to be paid for by the employer? No, you'd probably choose another location. What do you think about this entire situation? Drop your comments below, hit the like button, subscribe. You're also subscribe on my second YouTube channel. It's going to be an interactive call-in show this upcoming week. The link for that is down below, top comment pinned. And follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It's on the banner. And if you need help with your credit score, I have a team of amazing in-house credit repair specialists. If you want to make money on YouTube, you want to start a YouTube channel, a personal brand, start an online business on YouTube, cashnow.video. That's cashnow.video. If you want to learn about real estate investing, maybe you want to buy a deal when real estate crashes, cashnow.video. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.